And I just think that requiring even 80%, although it gives you some wiggle room, is probably too much. I could go with 60.
My thoughts on the idea of why some of the people are objecting to it is if I owned one of the pieces of one of the units that wasn't attached somewhere down the road, that could affect my ability to sell my unit and mainly my property value. Because to me, it's a lot more desirable to have an individual piece of individual structure. And it would seem to me that that affects your property values. Now, we can't legislate property values, but at least we're giving them an equal opportunity.
Well, you know, the old rule of thumb, always buy the smallest house in a subdivision
Right.
because you'll gain
Right.
value of your property by being in there with the bigger houses. And I think it's still true that a rising tide raises all boats, right? And I guess I'm not sure I agree with that argument.
In a
Two sides of that coin. One is also, you don't want a sinking boat to sink all ships either. You can go the other way. The developer can either have something positive, he also can be something negative.
right.
There's two sides to that coin.
Right. In this particular situation, we're talking, it makes better development having those detached. But we're not just looking at this particular situation. We've got to consider other situations, other developments that may come. And
It's been in place since when I came here. It was initiated about the time I came here. So, and I've been here almost 17 years.
Well, Mayor McGill, you live in Sugarwood, don't you? Yeah. Has there ever been a 100% vote in Sugarwood on anything on the homeowners association?
Well, that never happened. I mean, I don't think that's the issue.
No, and I think that's what we're saying. They shouldn't require a 100% vote.
Yeah, because
But this is
I
the
think we
first
agree
time.
on that.
Yeah, but this is the first time that there's ever been a problem.
Right.
Well, the one thing that concerns me is, you know, at one of the meetings, he had said that everybody was in agreement, or I thought he did. And then we had 3 people here last month, and all of those 3 were, and the one was the very first one who bought. And I would probably be a little upset too if I bought into something and then was thinking I was getting a particular thing and things started changing. But all 3 of those were not really in agreement, and especially that one young man. So frankly, I think I agree 100%. We need to change it, but I think 60 is too low, and 75 or 80 is where I'm headed.
Well, I personally think it's a good idea because if I were to live in a subdivision such as that, I'd certainly want to have an input. If they were going to be making
Absolutely.
changes in the area where I lived, I feel like it would be appropriate for me to have some input if they're going to be making
Absolutely.
specific changes. So I think this
Totally
is a good
agree.
thing. I would vote for 75%.
Yep. 75 or 80. 60 is way too low because, again, like you said, we're not looking at just this. We're looking at the future of what could possibly happen. 60 is, I just think that's too low.
Ruth, is that basically all we need to determine is the percentage, or?
Yeah, if you're in agreement in general with what I've put together, it just clarifies that, you know, there is no required sign-off on a concept or a preliminary plat. It's just stating that the owners need to be notified. Now, how that is done, we can do that a variety of ways, but that's more of an administrative thing than it is an ordinance thing as to how, because it's going to be dependent on how large the subdivision is. It's going to be dependent on whether there's absentee owners. there's gonna be a variety of ways to notify, so I don't think that needs to be spelled out in the ordinance, and you know, this doesn't clarify, it just says they shall be notified. So if you all are in agreement with all of that, then the real issue is the percentage of what you all feel comfortable. And what I've heard tonight is a range of 60 to 80. A compromise is 70.
Pardon? I do too. I like dot, either 75 or 80.
But do you want to keep it at 100? We can do that.
Pardon?
Can we have a poll?
I just think that, there was always a valid point made, that fact that every now and then, and particularly, it seems to be more and more every day, there's always some hard case that's against all reason, and trying to give some flexibility so that in our ordinances would help give the flexibility, give the rigor that's needed for the homeowners and their protection, but still deal with the possibility that there's some people.
If I can,
You may have another beef with the bill or somebody else,
Well, a
just
bit
doing
in
it
this
for
thing-
some other reason, not
But
necessarily on the merits
I'm-
of what's being done.
I'm concerned about I say supermajority I think is necessary, but a large one I'm not so sure about. It's very difficult to obtain signatures, approvals of this stuff from property owners for several reasons. One of them, you can't really identify who the property owner. Some of the properties are in estates and other places that are just, as a practical matter, almost impossible to get signatures on.
We
But
talked,
it hadn't been a problematic case in
That's-
17 years.
that's what I was going to say, and not only
But
that.
nobody's
we-
tried it.
But we talked about this last week, or last,
Nobody's done it before. So
If it was a big problem, we would have
Well, you
heard
know
about it.
Go ahead.
no, last month, we talked to the homeowners, and they said it will not be a problem for us to get in contact, remember? With all of them. The homeowners got, and you even mentioned, because I was concerned about computers. And they said every one of them but one person had computers, that they could get in contact with them. So that should not be an issue. I don't think it should be an issue. And like Ed said, for 17 years, it hasn't been an issue. And now, with the technology, it should be easier.
Just some other things I'd like you to think about. First of all, in this type of development, I would believe that on the front end, most of these people are thinking the same way to begin with, because quite frankly, you don't have the variety like you would in standalone homes. So, keep that in mind. These people already have a certain amount of a common bond to begin with. Plus, in all these residences versus single-family dwellings, you cut a hole in the wall, you're in their house. So, I challenge you with that a little bit. I agree and I understand with some of the comments that have been made, but these people moved into this type of development because they saw, they saw the commonality that they agreed with. And that in itself, I think, creates a certain amount of binding agreement on the front end as to what their expectations are versus single-family homes and a variety of sizes of homes. This development has limited variety, this type of development. Normally you see only 3 or 4 different options as to how the layout can be. So again, there's a unique binding agreement, unofficially at best perhaps, that exists with these types of developments to begin with. So I think the ability to get a higher level of consensus than one would typically expect would automatically happen in this type of situation. So I would just leave you with that thought.
I wouldn't disagree with you in the early stages, like this incident.
Have any, on parallel, do we have any subdivision restrictions that once they submit the plat, that they can't change it?
The only thing that we review with subdivision regulations, and Tom Hale reviews them, and we require them to be recorded prior to the issuance of a building permit, is that the common property is maintained, that there is a mandatory homeowner association, that there is a mechanism for maintenance and ownership of the common property, that there is a mechanism for increasing dues for the responsibility of that common property, and that there are restrictions placed on the common property for the uses that are allowed, and then that sometimes, will include detention basins and open space, passive and active, and different things like that. So it's primarily when Tom reviews that, because he reviews so many, he oftentimes will have suggestions to the person who prepares them, but that's all the authority we have with regards to them, and we cannot enforce their restrictions once they are recorded.
He could start building single-family homes and all of a sudden turn into condos and mega mansions or whatever?
Not following what you mean.
Well,
by
if you
that.
have a subdivision restriction versus Price Farms, which is single-attached families, but say on the original plat, he says, I'm going to build single-family homes on all these lots. And then that fails him, and he starts building condos and
Well, your
apartments and
zoning ordinance would restrict that, so
Yeah,
it's
from
whatever.
single-family to condos, for example?
Right, if you're,
Yeah.
that would restrict that because you have different zoning different zoning districts for, like the R4 district is the attached single-family. The OSMR includes the aspect of attached single families. And those are the only two districts that have the attached single family.
So the zoning for subdivisions, or in this case, Price Farms, that zoning wouldn't affect anything we're talking about? Well, the zoning for a subdivision is such, the zoning for the single attached is different?
Like the zoning for, let's say, Old Stage Hills is R2. It's the same as what's Concord Hills. It's the same what Forest West. It's the same as Sugarwood. It's the same as, a good many number of subdivisions like Andover Place and
Would the,
zoned R1.
Would the zoning of Price Farms dictate what they can do?
That allows the mixture of detached and attached.
Okay.
So are we in agreement that something needs to be done? We're just at a question
Step one.
here of
Okay.
Could we have a poll on the
percent.
percentage?
What I have is that I get the feeling that Ed Whiting, the mayor, and Ron Rochelle are leaning towards 60%, and that Cindy and Ron Honkin and Rita and Ed St. Clair and Melissa and Dot are leaning towards 75 or 80%. I just had an either or on that one. I wasn't real sure. Is that a good feeling of what I've
Yes.
been keeping track of? So, having said that, what would you like me to include at the next meeting?
I still think we should go to 75.
Well, I
That's if-
lose.
That's hitting a happy medium, and we have
75 is
fourth,
fine with me, too.
three-fourths is pretty
So
good.
Dot, are you making a motion?
I'll make a motion that we agree that 75% of the property owners must agree when modifications are made to a final plat.
I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?